The old man's hands were shaking, but not from the cold. He stood in the middle of a garden he had tended for 31 years, holding a cracked wooden picture frame against his chest like it was the only thing keeping him standing. In front of him, a man in a navy suit was pointing a finger in his face, shouting loud enough for the whole estate to hear. "You're fired. Get off my property. Now." The gardener didn't argue. He just looked down at the frame in his hands, like it mattered more than his job ever could. Nobody in that crowd knew what was inside it yet. But in a few minutes, it would change everything. His name was Elias, 68 years old. Every morning before sunrise, he walked 2 miles to this estate because his old truck had finally given out for good. He trimmed the hedges into perfect shapes. He grew roses that tourists stopped to photograph. He never missed a day, not even the year his wife passed. The man shouting at him was Julian Marsh, 39. He had just inherited the estate from his late grandfather, a quiet man named Thomas Marsh who everyone in town remembered as kind, humble, and strangely close to the staff. Julian was not like his grandfather. He wanted the estate modernized. Glass walls, a pool where the rose garden stood, and he wanted every old relic, his words, gone by the end of the week. That included Elias. "This garden is worthless," Julian said. "You're worthless. My grandfather was sentimental about a lot of things he shouldn't have been." Elias finally spoke, his voice steady despite the humiliation burning in his chest. "Your grandfather asked me to keep something safe. I think you should see it before you decide I'm worthless." He held out the frame. Julian almost knocked it out of his hands out of spite, but something made him stop. Inside the frame was an old, faded photograph. 3 young men, standing shoulder to shoulder in front of a small wooden house, decades ago. One of them was unmistakably a young Thomas Marsh. The other 2, Julian didn't recognize at all. "Where did you get this?" Julian demanded. "Your grandfather gave it to me himself," Elias said quietly. "Before he passed, he said if anyone ever tried to tear down this garden, I should show them this picture first. If you believe kindness and loyalty can still change everything, even after all these years, that's worth remembering as this story unfolds. Because the biggest twist hasn't happened yet." Julian stared at the photograph like it was speaking to him. "Who are these men?" he asked again, quieter this time. Elias took a slow breath. "One of them is your grandfather. The other 2 didn't have names anyone remembers now. Just 2 young workers he grew up with, on a farm that no longer exists. They made a promise to each other when they were 19. Whoever became successful first would take care of the other 2, no matter what." Julian's jaw tightened. "That's a nice story. But what does it have to do with you?" Elias looked away for a moment, like the memory still hurt. "My father was one of those 2 men in the photo. He worked himself into the ground his whole life and never made much of anything. When he got sick and we had nothing left, your grandfather showed up at our door. He didn't just help pay for treatment. He gave my father a job here, at this very estate, until the day he died. Then he gave me the same job, so I'd never have to ask anyone for charity." The garden went silent. Even the staff standing behind Julian stopped whispering. "He never told me any of this," Julian said, almost to himself. "He wasn't the type to brag about kindness," Elias said. "He just kept his promises quietly. For 50 years. Julian turned the photograph over. On the back, in shaky handwriting, were 7 words. "Some debts aren't paid in money. TM." For the first time since Julian arrived, his anger disappeared completely. He remembered something now. A conversation, years ago, that he'd brushed off as an old man's rambling. His grandfather once told him, "If you ever forget who I really was, ask the gardener." At the time, Julian had laughed it off. He wasn't laughing now. "I almost tore all of this down," Julian said, staring at the roses his grandfather had once walked through every single morning. "I almost erased the one place that actually remembers him." Elias didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Julian looked at the staff who had gathered, expecting to watch a man get thrown out. Instead, they watched something else happen. A man finally understanding where he came from. "You're not fired," Julian said. His voice cracked slightly. "This garden isn't getting torn down either. Not one flower." He paused, then added something nobody expected. "And starting today, you're not just the gardener. I want you to help me understand who my grandfather really was. Because clearly, I never really knew him at all." Elias finally smiled, decades of quiet dignity finally being seen. Word spread through the town faster than anyone expected. Not because Julian became rich overnight, he already was, but because he became something rarer, a man who chose to remember, instead of forgetting the people who built his family's legacy in silence. Every spring after that, Julian walked through the rose garden himself, sometimes with Elias, sometimes alone, always thinking about the same 7 words on the back of that photograph. Some debts aren't paid in money. Some are paid in loyalty, in dignity, in finally seeing the people the world overlooks. If this story moved you even a little, share it with someone who still believes kindness leaves a mark that lasts far longer than money ever could. And if you want more stories like this one, make sure you're subscribed, because the next story might be the one that changes how you see the world around you.